The enemy commander smiled as he locked her in the cell. One American soldier won't last a week here. 3 days later, his guards started disappearing. By the 10th day, he realized the prisoner had become the predator. Meet Staff Sergeant Isabella, Viper, Chen, 26 years old. Black hair, usually braided in military regulation style, that had seen more combat than most seasoned veterans. For 5 years, she had served as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne Division. But her medical training was only part of what made her one of the most dangerous soldiers in the U.S. Army. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, and subscribe to the Chief Force Tales channel. Isabella had grown up in the mountains of Montana, raised by a grandfather who was a retired Delta Force operator and a grandmother who was a Blackfoot tracker. From childhood, she had learned skills that couldn't be taught in any military school. How to move through hostile territory without leaving traces, how to survive on minimal resources, and how to kill silently when necessary. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Thomas Shadow Chen, had been one of the Army's most legendary Special Forces operators during the Iraq War. Little warrior, he would tell her during their weekend training sessions in the Rocky Mountains, survival isn't about having the best equipment. It's about thinking like your enemy, using their strengths against them, and never giving up when others think you're defeated. Her grandmother, Maria Silent Step Chen, had taught her Blackfoot tracking techniques passed down through generations of hunters and warriors. These skills included reading environmental signs that most people couldn't detect, moving through terrain without disturbing the landscape, and understanding behavior patterns that could reveal human presence. The combination of Blackfoot wisdom and Delta Force innovation had created a unique skill set that made Isabella exceptionally effective in environments where traditional military training was insufficient. Isabella had enlisted at 19, driven by a desire to serve her country and follow in her grandfather's footsteps. During basic training, instructors noticed that Isabella seemed to anticipate tactical situations before they developed, positioning herself advantageously while other recruits were still processing changing circumstances. Her call sign, Viper, had been earned during her 3rd deployment to Syria when she conducted a solo rescue mission to extract wounded soldiers from an ISIS ambush. Using medical knowledge and combat skills in combination, she had eliminated multiple enemy fighters while providing life-saving care to American casualties. The mission that led to her capture had begun as routine medical support for a special forces operation in the mountains of Syria. Isabella was assigned to provide medical coverage for a team conducting reconnaissance of suspected terrorist training camps near the Turkish border. The operation had been carefully planned based on intelligence reports indicating minimal enemy presence. But intelligence reports are never perfect, and the enemy had been expecting American operations in the region. The ambush had been planned by Commander Khalil Rahman, who had been studying American tactical procedures for months. Rahman understood that American forces relied on technological advantages, making them vulnerable to unconventional tactics that negated these advantages. In the chaos of the firefight, Isabella had been providing medical care to wounded team members when an explosion separated her from the main group. When the smoke cleared, she found herself alone, surrounded by enemy fighters who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Commander Khalil Rahman had been planning this ambush for months using intelligence gathered from captured American equipment. At 42 years old, he led a terrorist cell that specialized in capturing American soldiers for propaganda purposes and intelligence gathering. Rahman had built his reputation on breaking captured Americans through psychological torture and prolonged interrogation. His methods were designed to extract information about military operations while creating propaganda videos that could demoralize American forces. When Rahman's fighters brought Isabella to his compound, he saw an opportunity to gather intelligence about American Special Forces operations, create propaganda showing a female American soldier in captivity, and demonstrate his power over elite American military units. One American soldier won't last a week here, Rahman told his men as they locked Isabella in a concrete cell beneath his command center. Especially a woman who thinks she can fight like a man. We will break her spirit and use her to send a message to the Americans. The compound where Isabella was held was a fortified position carved into the mountainside, designed to withstand air strikes and ground assaults. Rahman commanded approximately 35 fighters who had spent years learning American tactics and developing countermeasures for special forces operations. Rahman's initial plan was to use traditional interrogation techniques to break Isabella psychologically before beginning intelligence extraction. He believed that isolation, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure would quickly reduce her to a compliant prisoner who would reveal military secrets. But Rahman had made a critical error in his assessment of Isabella Chen. He saw a female medic who had been separated from her unit, assuming that her medical training indicated weakness rather than the tactical intelligence that made her one of the Army's most dangerous soldiers. During her first 3 days in captivity, Isabella had been conducting reconnaissance of the compound, while Rahman's men assumed she was simply recovering from the shock of capture. Every time guards brought food or conducted inspections, she was gathering intelligence about their routines, security procedures, and the facility's layout. Her medical training gave her advantages that Rahman's men couldn't recognize. She understood human anatomy well enough to know exactly how to incapacitate or kill without making noise. Her knowledge of drugs and medical equipment provided opportunities for creating weapons from materials that seemed harmless. More importantly, her Blackfoot tracking skills allowed her to read environmental signs that revealed information about guard movements, shift changes, and the compound's daily routine. She could hear conversations through walls, detect movement patterns through vibrations, and identify weaknesses in security procedures. On the 5th night of her captivity, Isabella began implementing an escape plan that would transform her from prisoner to predator. But instead of simply escaping, she had decided to systematically eliminate Rahman's entire operation while gathering intelligence for future American operations. The first guard to disappear was Ahmed, a young fighter assigned to night security for the detention area. Isabella had identified him as the weakest link, inexperienced, overconfident, and prone to breaking established procedures. When Ahmed entered her cell for a routine inspection, Isabella used medical knowledge to render him unconscious without making noise. She then used his equipment to restrain him while acquiring his weapons and keys to other areas of the compound. But instead of immediately escaping, Isabella hid Ahmed's body and assumed his patrol route, using darkness and Blackfoot stealth techniques to move through the compound undetected. Her goal wasn't just escape. It was intelligence gathering and elimination of Rahman's operational capability. Over the following nights, Isabella conducted what amounted to a one-woman special operations campaign against Rahman's forces. She eliminated sentries who worked alone, gathered intelligence about the compound's layout and defensive systems, and positioned herself to systematically destroy Rahman's entire organization. Her grandfather's training in psychological warfare proved as valuable as her physical skills. By making guards disappear without explanation, she was creating fear and paranoia among Rahman's men that was more effective than direct confrontation. Rahman's fighters began reporting strange sounds in the night, equipment that had been moved or damaged, and the growing realization that someone was moving through their supposedly secure compound with complete impunity. The second elimination came on the 7th night when Isabella targeted the compound's communication specialist. Using stealth techniques learned from her grandmother, she infiltrated the communications bunker and eliminated the operator while gaining access to Rahman's entire intelligence network. From the captured communications equipment, Isabella learned the locations of other terrorist cells, planned operations against American forces, and Rahman's network of informants and suppliers. This intelligence would be invaluable for future American operations. The third and fourth eliminations occurred on consecutive nights when Isabella eliminated the guards responsible for perimeter security. These operations required her to move through areas covered by multiple sentries while avoiding detection by fighters becoming increasingly paranoid about the mysterious disappearances. By the 10th day, Rahman's compound was in a state of controlled panic. Half his guards had disappeared without explanation, his communications had been compromised, and his men were reporting encounters with an invisible enemy who seemed to know their every move. Rahman himself was beginning to understand that he had severely underestimated his prisoner. The American medic who was supposed to be broken and compliant had somehow become a ghost, systematically destroying his operation from within. Find the American woman, Rahman ordered his remaining fighters. She cannot have simply vanished. Search every inch of this compound. But Isabella was no longer hiding in the detention area. She had established a base of operations in the compound's maintenance tunnels, using her knowledge of building systems and Blackfoot concealment techniques to create a command center invisible to Rahman's increasingly desperate searches. From her hidden position, Isabella could monitor Rahman's communications, track the movement of his remaining fighters, and plan her final assault on the terrorist leader who had thought he could break her spirit through intimidation and isolation. The intelligence she had gathered revealed that Rahman was planning a major attack on American forces. Within the next week, multiple terrorist cells were coordinating an assault on a forward operating base where hundreds of American soldiers would be vulnerable to coordinated suicide attacks. Isabella realized that simply escaping would not be sufficient. She needed to eliminate Rahman and his entire operational network to prevent the planned attack on American forces. What had begun as survival had evolved into a mission that could save the lives of her fellow soldiers. On the 11th night, Isabella began her final assault on Rahman's remaining forces. Using weapons captured from eliminated guards and improvised explosives created from medical supplies and maintenance materials, she conducted simultaneous attacks on the compound's weapons storage, communication center, and command bunker. The attack for time to create maximum chaos while preventing Rahman's men from coordinating an effective response. Explosions destroyed their heavy weapons. Communications failures prevented coordination, and psychological pressure from mysterious disappearances had already broken their morale. Rahman's remaining fighters found themselves fighting an enemy who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, who knew their every move while remaining completely invisible. Many fled the compound rather than face an opponent they couldn't understand or counter. The final confrontation came when Rahman, desperate and cornered, attempted to reach his emergency communication equipment to call for reinforcements from other terrorist cells. But Isabella had been waiting for exactly this moment, having anticipated his likely escape routes and emergency procedures. When Rahman entered the communications bunker, he found Isabella waiting for him with intelligence files that documented his entire network and planned operations. The American medic who was supposed to have been broken by Captivity had instead become the instrument of his organization's complete destruction. "You were right about one thing," Isabella told Rahman as she prepared to eliminate the last threat to American forces in the region. "One American soldier couldn't last a week here. But I'm not just any soldier. I'm an airborne medic who learned from Blackfoot warriors and Delta Force legends. I don't just survive, I adapt, overcome, and eliminate threats to my fellow Americans." Rahman's death marked the end of a terrorist network that had been planning one of the largest coordinated attacks on American forces since the beginning of the Syrian conflict. The intelligence Isabella had gathered led to the disruption of multiple terrorist cells and the prevention of attacks that could have killed hundreds of American soldiers. When the rescue helicopter arrived at the compound's coordinates 2 days later, following Isabella's emergency transmission, they found a single American soldier waiting with intelligence files that documented an entire terrorist network and a compound filled with eliminated enemy fighters. The pilot's report would become legendary in special forces circles. "We came to rescue one captured medic. Instead, we found one soldier who had eliminated an entire enemy compound and prevented a major attack on American forces." Major Stevens, the Special Forces officer who debriefed Isabella after her rescue, struggled to understand how a single soldier had accomplished what would normally require an entire special operations team. Isabella looked at the officer who was trying to understand her experience. "Sir, I did what any airborne soldier would do. I adapted to the situation, used available resources, and eliminated threats to American forces. The enemy made the mistake of thinking that capturing me would break me. Instead, it gave me the opportunity to break them." 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Isabella Chen was promoted to Sergeant First Class and offered assignment to the most elite Special Operations units. Her escape and subsequent elimination of Rahman's network became a case study taught at Special Operations schools worldwide. Today, Master Sergeant Isabella Viper Chen trains Special Operations soldiers in survival techniques that combine modern military doctrine with Blackfoot wisdom and Delta Force innovation. Her students learn that true strength comes not from avoiding capture, but from turning captivity into opportunity. The terrorist commander who thought he could break one American soldier learned that some people become more dangerous when caged, not less. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, and the predator discovers that the prey was actually the apex predator all along. Isabella Chen didn't just survive enemy captivity. She transformed it into the enemy's worst nightmare, proving that sometimes the most dangerous place for your enemies is having you exactly where they think they want you.